Look at what coders are doing today and look at some of the workflows, look at these AI-enabled workflows, and then imagine a world where every employee in your business has like Jarvis and Iron Man, where they can be like, I need you to do this, and then I need you to do this. And it knows how to do, like in Iron Man, Jarvis knew how to build, how to synthesize a suit, how to change the color of the suit. But Tony Stark is the brilliant guy who built Jarvis, who is, hey, I need you to do these things. I need you to use a new type of material. I want it to be gold and red rather than just red because that's the aesthetic that I want. And so there's all of these decisions that the human's still making, even though you're paired with this incredibly powerful tool.
Welcome to another episode of AI for Your Business with Modern Logic. I'm Andy Rahn. Hey, do routine tasks consume too much of your time at business? Are you answering the same questions from customers over and over again, or dealing with lots of manual sales processes? We can help you implement AI at your company. Please reach out. You can find us at modernlogic.io/AI, where you can receive your free prompting guide. Again, that's modernlogic.io/AI. Today, we're going to talk about a really fascinating article that covers why AI is not scary monsters, it's normal technology. What does that even mean? Stay tuned.
All right, let's do this. New year, new podcast.
Yeah, the thing we want to talk about today is just a fascinating article we ran across, and I think we're going to just steal it wholesale. But it's this concept of AI is a normal technology. So I suppose we should give credits to this. This was published by Columbia University, Arvind Narayanan. Oh boy, I should have practiced that. And Sayesh Kapoor. Anyway, these two authors really have an interesting take on AI, because if you listen at Hollywood, it's going to be all doom and gloom, or giant robots, or AI becomes a otherworldly entity that tries to blow up the moon or something.
To be clear, it could do that. It's deeply unlikely with the moon blowing up, but I do think we don't want to hand wave around the ethical or the potential societal impacts of AI in the long term. But I think what I liked about this article is it most resonated with me in terms of both my opinion on AI and what I'm seeing when I'm going talking to people about AI, which is AI on the surface is this massive sea change in how we do technology.
And magical.
It's magical when you use it. It does all this cool stuff and scary stuff. But then you go out into businesses and you look at how people are using it in their daily lives, and you start to realize in the back of your mind, like, this isn't that big of a change, in that it's a powerful technology, but we've had powerful technologies before. Right.
Or I would say that fear and doubt is actually causing people to not take action, because they're like, how do you take advantage of this thing? It's this giant 7-handed Hydra monster. People are just staying home.
Yeah. And I think this article really succinctly breaks it down across a number of different phases and talks about why that is. And I think their fundamental premise is that, yes, AI is a very powerful technology, but it's a normal technology. And in that, what they mean by that is the life cycle of it is actually consistently following the life cycle of the previous technology sea changes we've seen in our lives, like the internet, like mobile apps. And in that way, it's not, and this is what I tell other business owners when I talk to them is, yeah, you can look at the surface layer and how fast everything is moving. You can be terrified. But the reality is, when you look a little bit under the surface, it's moving in ways we can get our arms around. It's in a way we understand. And their argument is that it might be moving a little faster, but even that is an arguable thing, because if you look at it, we're about to come up on 3 years this technology has been in existence, and how many of our businesses have been fundamentally changed by it versus how many of our businesses are just starting to adopt it.
But if you compare that to, say, when the personal computer came out, that also was a sea change. And depending on how you look at it, you might say that the actually personal computer adoption was faster than our adoption of AI, which is staggering, because who hasn't tried ChatGPT? But I think what if you look at it through a lens of dollars spent? You got to remember those first IBM PCs were expensive, and nevertheless, businesses were investing in one unit for how many of their employees? Half of them, most of them.
Yeah.
So financially, it may not be really that much faster than other technologies that have come before. So I think that is a great way to frame it, because now we have
Yeah.
a point of reference.
They start out by basically, we'll just walk through a few of these things and these sort of insights that they've had. And it's a very good article. We should link it in the show notes so other people can go read it. They go much further into it than we're capable of in the podcast. But they start by saying AI is not super intelligence. And they postulate that super intelligence either will never happen or is happening on a much slower time frame. And so first, what do we mean by super intelligence? Super intelligence to the layman basically means all of these 3 AI companies are saying that at some point the model is going to be able to think like a human, because right now they reason to some degree, and that just means they break things logically to steps. They do inference, they figure out what the next steps are. So it feels like they're thinking, but the reality is behind the scenes, there's no being there. They're not sentient. And when they talk about super intelligence, their premise is once we actually figure out a way to make AI a living being, a sentient being, it will start augmenting itself, and it will rapidly become more intelligent than every being on the planet all at once. And that's their argument. And
I just don't think that's
these people
useful.
just don't buy that.
I agree with the authors here. I don't buy that. That is extending what we have today in an unrealistic projection forward. And I maybe have talked about this before, but really the technology moves in fits and starts. So
Right.
LLMs, that was a big leap forward, but everything since then has been, how do we use this? And we have tools now that didn't exist when LLMs first came into existence, but they're not fundamentally bringing us more than just the LLM itself brought us. Superintelligence is going to require at least one or probably several additional new, unknown, revolutionary insights to get us there. And no one knows how that's going to be done. So I think more realistic is incremental, cool adaptations, uses of what we have today, but it's not going to be super intelligent.
And I think that part is really cool because to some degree, one, super intelligence is where you start getting the really bizarre outcomes that are really hard to predict. But two, it says that we can use this technology right now as it is for what it's good at without having to worry about so much about it becoming so dramatically different that we've lost all of our current investment. I think
another thing
LLMs
that
are
they
going to be
talked
what
about
they are.
is that adoption is going to be slower, maybe than some of the dreamers and the marketing and all that indicate it will be. And there's a really interesting story in there about how, okay, this is not a large language model powered AI story, but it is a carefully created, statistically modeled artificial intelligence story. And so Epic, which is the makers of a lot of the healthcare software that the United States uses, they were trying to solve this problem where patients would develop sepsis and the medical professionals weren't detecting it on time, weren't treating it promptly. And so it's a big problem in hospitals. And so they very carefully trained a system by hand to detect sepsis so that you would have early detection so you could head this off before it became a really life-threatening issue for patients. And all their modeling leading up to launch showed, okay, this is going to be a great tool.
Yeah.
But what happened was it did not work at all in practice, because it turns out after the kind of after action report, they were feeding one of the indicators into the AI was, has the doctor already prescribed antibiotics? And so they were actually relying on the expertise of the physicians prior to using the tool as a way to inform the tool. But the problem is once it went to deployment, the doctors were no longer doing that deep thinking themselves. They were going straight to the tool. So that leading indicator was missing. And so it turns out it didn't work at all, because it was basically leveraging the knowledge of the physicians, which then when you use the tool, they were cut out of the loop because now we have this tool for that. What do we?
And
need
it's
the
missing
doctors to do?
that data that it's using as a primary indicator. which essentially is, we know there's a problem that needs antibiotics in the first place.
And this will happen with large language models because they're operating on essentially the same principle. They're going to reach around and look for all the clues around and say, oh, I'm going to trigger off this clue here and maybe help elevate that as a course of action for your business. But
right.
Particularly in safety critical systems, it's not okay to just hand wave around. Wait, how did it know that? It's going to take much more rigorous work and a lot of rigorous testing. And so that's going to slow it down. There will be other domains where AI can just go explosive growth because it's not life critical, safety critical kind of operation.
Marketing, sales, customer
right?
service.
A lot of those are already just, if we can get 50%, we're doing great.
Yeah, I think the other, stepping back and looking at the meta a little bit there, their argument is that AI is still in the innovation phase, and they broke these things across a number of phases. And the first two are innovation and then adoption. There's a reason we're seeing most of the AI investment around data centers, frontier model training, the technology companies starting to build it in. But the real adoption phase, their argument is, and I agree with them, starts when you start to see AI get built into products and tools that normal humans, those of us in this room, can understand, and then we can just buy it off the shelf to solve a business problem that we have, right? Or we can bring it in a small way and to solve a specific business problem that we have, so we see the ROI. And we're just beginning to translate from that innovation phase into that phase where we can easily buy, because business owners don't buy speculation. Often, most business owners, we buy things that we think are going to grow our business, are going to solve problems for our business. And so there's this layer in between, these product builders that help translate those sorts of technologies in ways that you can understand. And I'm trying to think of an analogy for like mobile apps. When we first came up with mobile apps, there was this argument that everyone would want a mobile app. But the reality is, the only people that don't need mobile apps are the people for whom their customers are going to be interacting with them on the go, or their customer's primary computing device, because they're in the field, for example, needs to be a mobile app. And so we didn't really see point companies adopt that. We saw a bunch of companies come out with products in the middle, and now you've got ERPs and so on where you just install it and you use it. And so most small businesses and mid-sized businesses, most of them didn't have a need to pay for that technology. Similarly, with websites, we didn't really see e-commerce. E-commerce stuck around I was selling e-commerce apps in the late 90s, like stuck around this innovation phase until Amazon really demonstrated that, no, this is the way that things are going to go. And there was a point in there where you couldn't even get credit card processing online because the banks didn't trust the web. And then Amazon proved the theory, and then everyone went and did it. But most of us in the e-commerce world, when we go and build e-commerce websites, for example, like, we're pulling off the shelf e-commerce tools like Stripe that are managing the credit cards. We're not building that for the customers, because all of that has been commoditized, homogenized, and made easy to access. So what used to cost $100,000 costs $1,000. Stripe, for example, integrating Stripe is pretty cheap. Integrating Shopify is pretty cheap.
So if I could restate, just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying there, is there are a lot of obstacles that make the projection of adoption a lot slower than maybe the rosy projections from Sam Altman and so forth might make it seem. Actually, if I could follow up to that, I think this isn't exactly talking about adoption rate, but I think if you listen to the CEOs of the AI companies, they're obviously going to spin things to make it look as fantastic as they can, because that's their business. But I think a lot of those benchmarks that they are putting out might be misleading, and because there are problems with some of those benchmarks. For example, they talk about how ChatGPT 4 could score like 90% on the bar exam. And so I'm sure all the attorneys out there are thinking, oh my God, my job's over. But it turns out there's way more to being a lawyer than passing the bar exam. Bar exam is like probably multiple choice. That's perfect for a large language model. It's designed to be like, find the statistically most likely answer. That's what it does. But I've made this parallel before, but just quick callback. I'm a software engineer. I have a lot of AI tools for software. And there's this thing called vibe coding where you just let the AI just make stuff up and then see if it works. And there's all kinds of automated tooling in there to help it get it right. The compiler will say, hey, you didn't write that sentence right. It doesn't make sense. It'll quick iterate before you even note it and fix that. Other tools like linters, unit tests, all this. And this, honestly, when I go back in my career, this is why I became a computer guy, because I don't know if anyone knows it, but I was a molecular biologist once, and I couldn't stand that I had to wait overnight. I do something and you like let it expose, let the reaction run. And it was super frustrating. 24 hours later, you find out if you did it right. Imagine like in the attorney case, can you vibe be an attorney? Just show up at the courtroom, just
you can, it's a bad idea.
Just make stuff up. Oh, this guy got sentenced to 30 years in jail, and even though he was innocent, we'll just iterate. We'll do better next time. How terrible would that be? You can't vibe attorney.
And I think the summary there is there's a difference between memorization and judgment. And I think what we're seeing is that these models are really good at memorization. So I'd say the gradation I would think of is high school classes where you're just remembering these are where the states are and these are where the capitals are. College classes where you have to do essay work, although that's changing, and do a little more synthesis. And then the college kids get out into the real world and they actually have to apply these skills. And each one is like a huge leap up this difficulty chain where we're expecting you to think and reason more. And then even beyond entry level, you get into this mid-level. And I think what we're seeing is that AI is smacking down those lower layers, pancaking the people for whom memorization, categorization,
a lot of
the people that can basically
boilerplate.
cheat on the tests. It's making it super easy to cheat on the tests.
Anything that you can just kind of tune out and do by rote, that kind of boilerplate aspect of your work. Yeah, AI is going to eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the actual key, strategic, innovative, important parts of, like in the lawyer case, of building a case for your client, AI is it's not going to be able to do that.
This is why we're seeing it excel in places like marketing writing, because it turns out that most marketing writing looks like other marketing writing. But even then, you want a senior person who can look at that and say, this is good, this is bad, this is in our voice, this isn't, to be making those final decisions. I think one of the things that the LLM brought in that previous technologies didn't is it does help you innovate. It can give you ideas. It can suggest words. It can give you, it can give a smart person, hey, have you thought about this? Or here's something that you haven't looked at, because it's a better synthesizer, which is ultimately what the technology does, is synthesize, than previous technologies. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, so in your lawyer example, it might be that give me 5 examples of case law that might apply to this scenario, or 5, and then you go and you have a senior person check every link and make sure it's real cases. But it can help you in ways that the previous technology could make those rote tasks of research go faster. In that way, that's the innovation, right? Like one of the pieces of the innovation is the ability to go and synthesize, but it doesn't replace human judgment. And so this article that from Columbus talks about what the future of work looks like. And their argument is that the future of work is people who know what they're doing, who have good judgment, paired with AI enabled knowledge workers. So we don't necessarily have to worry about humans being completely written out of the equation. We have to understand, and this is something I really do believe, that just like when the internet came out and there was this moment where many business owners were like, I can run the business the old way, and many business owners looked at it and said, hey, if we aren't AI enabled, we're going to be dead. And I think it's similar, internet enabled. And it's similar, we're at this moment where you could look at your business and say, I can just run it the way I did, but you're going to have competitors, and you have the sea change where your AI enabled worker is going to be so much more productive than your non-AI enabled worker. And that is happening, right? I think we're beginning to see that happen. And like you said in previous podcasts, coding is where we're seeing this happen quickest, because obviously that's one of the use cases they're really pushing on, because the people who build models are coders and so on.
It's a domain that's readily accessible to a computer, because all of the work is done at a keyboard. all of the verification of the work is done by looking at a screen. There's no external reality really you have to engage with. But if you think about other domains, let's have fully AI automated trucking. Okay, they are actually making great strides to have self-driving vehicles. It's taken decades. It's a very hard problem to solve, but they're making headway. But it turns out like to replace a truck driver is more than just driving a truck.
And
It's the
they talk
cargo.
about Waymo in this article, right? And how
Yeah.
Waymo is actually one of the first things that penetrated. And that's because they spent the time, effort, energy, and money to make sure they got safety right. Whereas if you look at Tesla, they basically YOLO'd it because that's Elon's way is to. And when you talk about adoption, especially in safety, highly regulated industries like driving, if you look at it like it's highly regulated to some degree, their argument is that the pace of regulation is going to slow down the innovation. And that is not only a requirement to play, but it's a necessary step in innovation cycles to make sure that we do not allow the technology to ruin society. And so I think one of the other cool things about the article that they argue is that when you talk about AI risk management, right? Are we going to create terminators that kill us? Are we going to put everyone out of work everywhere? Are we going to have cars crashing into each other in the highway willy-nilly, right? Their argument is that we already have the regulatory infrastructure and the impedances to prevent that from happening. We don't need to invent new types of, ideally we do have some sort of new regulations, but their argument is like in things like medical, traffic, etc., the infrastructure already exists to regulate this technology and has existed for decades. And so it will slow down the innovation, and it needs to, so that we have time to get this right.
Interesting. I think I just wanted to circle back to touch on another point I was talking about, which is yet again, AI is going to actually bolster human productivity rather than replace it, I think. Like what I was starting to talk about with trucking. Maybe the truck is able to drive itself or to assist a driver to be safer on the road. But can AI really climb in the back and inspect the manifest for all the things in the truck? Can AI actually get a ratchet strap and make sure it's securely tied down? Can AI, it's just, you still need people to accomplish the real world tasks that power businesses today. So it's going to be a pairing. Your workers are more productive with AI than before, but AI alone is not going to cut the mustard.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of use cases where any of us who have done work in our industry for decades knows that there's so many places where the difference between the task and the craft is a really wide gap. So like we used to talk about, there's a difference between software engineering and software craftsmanship. And those of us, even this was a conversation when we were all at Adobe, which is you get a coder in out of school or out of their first job a couple years in, and you expose them to, hey, we're now building products that are going to be used by hundreds of millions, if not a billion people. And for me, that was a huge, like massive wall I had to climb. And I learned a ton from all these great people around me. But I think the difference there is I grew up cutting my teeth, starting my own businesses and going in consulting and solving problems. And wherein the solution of the problem was, I need to do this. What happens in the box doesn't matter. The outcome is what matters. And I could go in and grind through it and not necessarily make the wisest decisions. I could brute force a lot of these Excel automations and database transformations and so on. And then you get to some place like Adobe where what works matters as much as what it does. And then not only that, but how it's built matters, because over time, when you're building something that's expected to last, Lightroom, we built Lightroom in what, 2005? I don't know when 1.0 released. It is still a product today that people are buying. That is a big difference.
A lot of the features we built then are still in it today.
I bet you a lot of our code is still running. And the craft of building code that you know is going to run for decades, that is, I think, where AI is going to take a long time, if ever, to catch up.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking of a customer who reached out to us recently about, if I can vibe code things, why would I need a marketing technology software development agency to come do anything anymore? And what's really interesting is, yeah, you can just go and use Replit or any number of these AI coding things, and basically by talking to it, build the app of your dreams. You don't need anyone to do it, just you and your time. But then what happens is, rapidly, it becomes very complicated. It becomes even just structurally, the organization of your software product that you've created is going to be something you can get lost in. And you'll be asking yourself, wait, is this how it should be organized? And then it may start getting kind of doing things on one part of the app one way, and like the internal consistency of the structure of the app, it reaches a level of complexity and what we would call technical debt. And so the problem with having someone who knows nothing about software just vibe code their way into a new product is you get stuck. And so the better way to do this is to actually have someone who's experienced in developing software products and let them leverage AI. You're going to have a way better outcome with less technical debt, a better thought out end-to-end flow for the product. So yeah,
I think that it's the analogy, maybe it's because it's early and I was feeding my cats, is it's like throwing a kitten into a ball of yarn versus having your wife, who is a renowned textile artist, and giving her a ball of yarn, right? You end up with dramatically different results, and the kitten might be entertaining, but your wife produces art. And I think, like, apps and coding and a lot of our work, knowledge work, has geometric complexity, which means, like, the bigger it gets, the more it gets more complex faster based on time than anything else. And code is a good example. So you end up with vibe coding. It might be great for simple things, or if the outcome doesn't matter that much, right? There are so many tasks for which vibe coding might be the right solution, because you're going to use it once and then you're going to throw it away. Or you're going to use it to do one thing over and over again, but it's an easy thing. Whereas vibe coding an Excel algorithm, for example, right? Or just prototyping. It's great for prototyping.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then you get 6 months into your development build, vibe coded, and you make a change to a button on a screen over here, and the whole thing stops working because of decisions the AI made in the first 2 weeks. And you don't even have the technical knowledge to understand why it's doing that. And even we, who are very senior, some of the logic chain between those connections isn't built the way a human would build it, or the way it should be built. And it gets back to the craftsmanship. And so it is now costing you more money to pay down the technical debt than if you had just built it right in the first place. And there was an article I saw late last year, and I'll have to look up the attribution, which is called The Age of Mediocre Apps. And I do think when you're a business owner, there's this concept of the thing that you use, or the outcome that you get, is more valuable than how you got it. And what I mean by that is, most of us have used ERP, most of us use Excel, most of us used Office and Outlook and so on. Not many people love those tools. In fact, many people hate those tools.
Yeah.
Many business owners, their employees are using things in the field service industry, for example, that they constantly complaining about, but they're still using them because the result for the business is that they get what they need. Say invoicing goes out right, quality control is done right, upsells are done correctly. And the fact that the app is terrible to use, it'd be ideal if it were better, but honestly, no matter how bad it is, they're still going to use it because the end result is something they couldn't get without it. And I think in those cases, AI coding is going to start moving the needle and making that software cheaper, faster, easier to deploy, easier to customize. But I think in cases where, like, customer-facing use cases, websites, chatbots, mobile apps, things that are interfacing with people who are making a decision about your company, those are going to still be the domain of experts. And I do think AI coding will come up, but I think that back to the legal thing, there's a heck of a layer between your paralegal, your synthesizer, and the people who prep for court cases, and your lawyer who's looking across and saying, what's our overall strategy here? How are we going to win? What instinctively do I know about this judge in this environment, and so on?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly with coding, you're going to, in a lot of these cases, for instance, you're building a product or you're building a website to represent your brand. You want at least a few people in the room who understand you can't do it this way, even though the AI makes that easy, because this is going to give you a black eye when your customers interact with it. Because this moment matters, and I know it matters because I've got the experience. Whereas the AI is just like, you told me to do the thing. Yes, sir, I did the thing. And like it doesn't consider the soft human issues. And this is something that reminds me, just in management, something that I run into all the time, which is there's a difference between how something is perceived and received and the necessity to message that thing, right? You've heard me probably talk about this all the time. There are tons of situations where you go into a sale or you go into a customer service scenario, and the customer needs to hear a thing that might not be great, or might be, this thing is going to be more expensive than you expected. This is a really common one, right? And the way you deliver that message really matters, because you could deliver that message just saying, hey, by the way, this is 3 times your budget. And you're not going to get that's the customers, I don't have the budget. Or you can say, this was unexpected. We went in, if we did it the exact way it was, you're asking, but here's a couple alternatives to get it to 1/3 of the budget. There's some trade-offs we could make. I understand that this wasn't what you were expecting, and now you've got a much better outcome because you've given the customer options and ways to think about the problem and solutions. AI is very much, here's the price, it's 3 times the budget, buy, right? It doesn't have those things in the back of your brain that go, oh, there's another human receiving this information, and it's my job to translate this for that human, right? And honestly, this is a really common scenario for me in sales, right?
Another thing it does for me that's super frustrating is it's such a people pleaser, or what's the word for it? Where it basically tries to say what you want to hear. And that's frustrating when you're trying to make a critical business decision, where it's like, is this actually good advice I'm getting from this AI? Or is it just trying to understand what I was hoping it would say and basically be a confirmation bias enabler, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do sometimes.
I'm clearly the best salesman and business owner in the history of mankind. That's what my AI told me right before this call. Like, my strategies are that of great emperors. Yeah, there are ways, I think, in the prompting to get it to be, I have several GPTs that are highly critical, but it's not out of the box. It reminds me of an extremely enthusiastic puppy. It wants to be so helpful, and it's been trained on all this helpful language. And so it requires those of us who are good at what we do, when we use it in a context for which we are good at, we can detect that it's blowing smoke. Whereas if you are using it in a context you are not an expert at, you might get the wrong idea because it's still blowing smoke, but you don't have, it's like Dunning-Kruger, right? Like, you don't know that you don't know, and it leads you down, it leads you astray. So I think the way I see this working out, and it's an interesting exercise, I think, for the audience that we've gone through here, which is, think about the roles inside your company. Look at what coders are doing today, and look at some of the workflows, look at these AI-enabled workflows, and then imagine a world where every employee in your business has like Jarvis and Iron Man, where they can be like, I need you to do this, and then I need you to do this, and then I need you to do this. And I think that's the
AI assistant you can actually talk to and actually can do things and not just mess them up all the time.
And it knows how to do, like in Iron Man, Jarvis knew how to synthesize a suit, how to change the color of the suit. But Tony Stark is the brilliant guy who built Jarvis, who is, hey, I need you to do these things. I need you to use a new type of material. I want it to be gold and red rather than just red, because that's the aesthetic that I want. And so there's all of these decisions that the human is still making, even though you're paired with this incredibly powerful tool. And I think every knowledge worker in our businesses is going to increasingly be in this position where they are delegating the busy work of their job, and they are doing
Yeah.
more and more synthesis, decision making, taste making. So I think it's going to be really important that your employees have tastes that align with your corporate culture, with your client, with your customer culture. Values are going to matter more. Like my view of the world, where it's going is, to some degree, taste and trust are going to become the biggest commodities in your business, because doing the work is going to get easier and easier. But
Right.
your
Yeah.
customer trusting you, having a represented brand that people respect, having the ability to choose between two equal options that appear equal to a machine, but result in different feelings, different outcomes, different success rates. That's always going to be the bastion of the human, right? And so there's
I think
real value you can still build in your business.
It's going to roll out at different rates for different disciplines, because not every aspect of your business has the same level of security and trust. So I feel
Yeah,
like
if you're in a
we've
highly
done a good
regulated
job
business,
of talking like about through the first half of this paper, and we're already coming up on our time for today. It continues on to talk about ways AI security and safety are going to be a challenge, and also policy implications for lawmakers around what should we do with AI. So I really encourage everyone out there to look up the paper. It's a fascinating read. There'll be a link in the show notes so you can dig in for yourself. I think, what are some closing thoughts for what we've been able to cover today?
so I would say my key takeaway from this is AI isn't actually as scary as it might seem, and we need to start engaging with it as another technology that can enable us to deliver ROI to our customers and our businesses, and start looking at places where it can and does play, and looking at products that make it easier for us to engage, rather than looking at it as something that we need to stop and fundamentally reinvent our businesses, because I don't think that right now is the case. I think it's right now we need to look at it as this incredibly powerful tool that we need to adopt to stay competitive, like the internet was, but
Yeah.
not think about, okay, from the ground up. Because if we think we need from the ground up, need to reinvent our business, it's not going to happen. We don't have the time. We're busy doing our businesses. So I think
Yeah.
that's what I would say. And look at the places where it would play really well. What are we doing in customer service? What are we doing in marketing? What are we doing in sales? How are we using it to ideate at the leadership level? Where those are the places that it's playing really nicely and really well already. And the adoption rate there can be higher and faster. And so what tools can you bring in tomorrow to replace
When
routine
I
work and so on,
and
without
and
having
take the
to
time to
upset the
look
apple
around.
cart? Yeah.
Take the time, because every tool you're using today is going to have AI capabilities coming week by week. And so the challenge will be like sussing out, are they actually useful for you? And how do you integrate across all these different silos? Because every product is going to try to take over and be the AI product. And I just don't think it's going to work out that way. It'll turn
Right.
out that everything you use is going to be made better through the correct application of AI, and getting rid of all the crufty, like, I don't care that I can draw a picture of a unicorn. I don't need that very often in my
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. And I think your point there, look at what the products are doing. Let them pay to some degree for the cost of innovation and R&D. And then you
Yeah.
get the result, which is Copilot is built into everything. And now you get to
Yeah.
evaluate, is Copilot good for me? Or how do I use these technologies in ways that I know they can use? And then if you're having trouble there, that's when a partner like us comes in and says, okay,
Right.
you're doing a new thing. Here's how you use AI to do that new thing.
Or even just
faster,
how to
better,
connect
cheaper.
these things together.
Right.
Like, the complexity of the technology landscape in business is not going to get simpler. It's just going to accelerate. That's one of
Right.
the consequences of this.
Yeah, one of the things where an organization like ours plays, and I think is going to continue to play, is pulling all that data together into a place and integrating with all the different disparate systems you have, because there's only
Yeah.
so much capability that, say, Outlook is going to add to Outlook. And they're never going to add, okay, now Outlook is integrated with your field service software, or Outlook is now integrated with your your logistics software for your trucking. And so that's where places like integrators come in, where they say, okay, let's get all this data in one place and let's design a system that can put dashboards on top of all of it so you can see what's really going on. And so there's a lot of spaces there. And I think in terms of marketing and websites and mobile apps and those sorts of things, I think those are all things that need to then integrate with pieces of your business. And those are places where I think craftsmen and technologists still have a role to play, and AI isn't. Because if you look at what the product companies are trying to do, they're all trying to solve one specific type of delivery vertical for you, but your business is all of those things combined. And so I think that's where reaching out to someone like us makes sense. But I think overall, it starts with just a deep understanding of what tools do we have available. And that's something you can very easily suss out, or have a simple conversation. Be like, okay, we have Salesforce. What do we do? What is Salesforce doing with AI, and where are they going? So it's not as scary. I just keep telling people, it's not scary technology. It seems scary. Everyone wants you to be scared. The news makes it sound scary. It's really cool, really easy to use technology.
It is cool. And also, you need to use your customers. Your customers are in the same boat. They're a little bit scared, uncertain as well. But this stuff is going to get rolled out eventually, and you want to be ready when it does.
You don't want to be an early adopter too early, but you also don't want to be the late adopter.
Or too late. It's a little bit of a Goldilocks situation here.
Right.
But yeah, eventually we all got to pick our porridge or whatever.
Bed? I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've heard I think it was it beds and porridges? I don't know.
I think it's beds and porridge. Good. Yeah, in the woods with bears.
Here we go.
Anyway, thanks for joining us. Please remember to follow us on our platforms. We got Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. AI for Your Business is written by me, Andrew Rahn, and Dustin Bruzenak. It's produced and edited by Ryan Peterson, with additional contributions by Dylan Bruzenak, Anna Spitz, and Beth Davis. Our AI mascot was created by the artist Becca Rahn. Our theme music is called Elastic Vibe by Ziv Moran. Do you have a question or a suggestion we can discuss? Please get in touch with us at modernlogic.io/podcast. AI for Your Business is a production of Modern Logic. If you like the show, please remember to share, rate, and review. It really does make a difference to us.